Today, Dr. Jones comes to us as a father and a professor who means more to his students than the grades he gives them and the lectures he delivers. I'm sure all of you know of the website Rate My Professors, and I honestly don't think I could give a more glowing introduction than the one provided by an anonymous student from his Bio 111 class, when she said, "I absolutely love Dr. Jones!" Exclamation point. He is such a sweetheart and such a father figure to his class. He's super fun and really into his subject. And another who stated, "Dr. J is an amazing professor. I tell you with all of my heart, and I continually insist that he is amazing." Amazing in all caps and followed by 7 exclamation points. So with that, I'm pleased to open the floor for Dr. Jones in his last lecture presentation.
The thing that you need to realize about Rate My Professor is if you read that description, you'll also find somebody who says, "I'm horrible and I experiment with my students." And the experiment with my students was based on, in the 20 years I taught in this room, the temperature of the room has a direct relationship to how many of your eyelashes I see and how many of your eyelids. It's cool enough now that I'll be able to keep you awake. When it gets hot, you gotta slide forward in the seats. The back of your head touches the back of the chair. You're gone. You're gone. Well, the last lecture. The fun part about doing the last lecture is the number of people who run up to you and say, "Are you leaving?" There are a good many of them. Now you're stuck with me for a couple more years. I'll admit I hit 65 at the end of this one, but you're going to be stuck with me for a few more after that. Well, I want to start by telling you a story. Long ago, 4 people really were into it before civilization. The animals gathered around and they looked at this poor, furless beast, and it was freezing, and it was cold. They said, "What can we do for this critter? It's going to freeze this winter. It doesn't have any fur, doesn't have any feathers. What can we do?" Well, the squirrel said, "It needs fire. That'll keep it warm." Where do we get fire? Where do you find fire? Well, obviously the sun. The squirrel said, "I'll run up the tallest tree." And being a Mary Baldwin squirrel, picked an oak, ran up the tallest tree and couldn't reach the sun. Jumped, but couldn't reach the sun. Well, then the birds came along. And the birds said, "We'll do it. No sweat." And a whole flock of starlings, they took off, and they flew, and they flew, and they got higher and higher. Couldn't do it. They were too small. Their wings didn't carry them high enough. Then a hawk. Hawk said, "I'm big and strong. I can fly. I'm the fastest flyer around." So the hawk, he soared and he soared and he rose and he rose. He couldn't get there. Almost. And despite all his bragging and all his boasting, he had to come back down. Well, the owls were about the quietest flying birds. And a great horned owl, without any fuss or fury, silently took off. And all of a sudden, the critters realized that this owl was going up and going up. But it was real clear that the owl was getting tired too. It was looking real clear that the owl wasn't going to be able to make it either. Just as the owl sort of flapped his last flap, the wings were quivering. A hush went up from the ground. Because this small little red bird, you could hardly see it from the ground, took off from the back of the owl. And the cardinal made it up to the sun and brought fire back down to man so that we could be warm in winter. He's been red ever since. Well, the moral of this tale is that it takes teamwork. The cardinal couldn't have gotten there on his own. He needed somebody to get him there. Somebody to show him the way. Somebody who didn't feel a need to get all the credit. The cardinal brought back fire. And we've been warm ever since. Well, we're all built on foundations, on building blocks. For me, a lot of it goes to my faith. Starts with the belief that there's that of God in everyone. And I mean everyone. Sometimes it's pretty deeply hidden, but it's there. And you'll notice there's sort of a thing that goes with my faith. Key is putting your faith into practice. Doing what you believe. And it's almost more important than the fine points of what it is you believe. I come from a tradition that says, let your yea be yea, and your nay be nay, and swear no oaths before me. And if you've ever seen a legal document that says, I swear, parentheses, affirm, that's the doing of my people. When we came over to Penn's Woods a good many hundred years ago, tis a gift to be simple. Tis a gift to be free. Well, where do we go from there? How did that make the critter that you've got in front of you now? Family. That's my sister holding me. That's the first recorded picture that anybody's got of me. I think I'm about a week old. What created the character that you know? I had binoculars hung around my neck when I was 4. We spent all our vacations places where the birds were good. That meant the mosquitoes were good too, but the birds were the important. Dad's sitting there with a camera. Mom's got her binoculars and is identifying some blasted, confusing fall aster. But that was what I grew up with. Yeah, I'm from the city of Philadelphia. But I grew up in nature. And, as you see, I've always liked cats. I use a different lens now and a different camera. Take pictures of different things. but still nature. I got my start at a place called Germantown Friends, Quaker school in Philadelphia. About a quarter of my class was Quaker. The rest was everything you could imagine. There were some very important people, and I learned different things from all of them. Joe Cadbury was my grade school science teacher, 1st through 6th. Joe's room, oh Lordy. If he'd still been around when they filmed Harry Potter, it would have made it into one of those scenes. More critters, more stuff, this and that. In the winter, you could tell which room was his from the parking lot, because the windowsills were lined with, sorry about this, dead squirrels. He was a bird bander, and if squirrels got into his bird feeders and his traps where he was trying to catch birds so he could put wristlets on them, they didn't necessarily make it out. And in the winter, when it was cold enough, he just saved the squirrels on the windowsill and we dissected them after school. Where you could count on seeing Joe was at the cafeteria. Right where you carried your tray back in to get the dishes washed. And Joe would stand there, and if you walked by him with a half-eaten or an uneaten piece of fruit, snap. Didn't miss one. He had the happiest box turtles in that classroom you can imagine. Eating on fresh pear all winter. What I learned from Joe is very simple. That you guys can add a lot to a class. You can tell us things. We don't need to go out and buy the fanciest stuff in the world. Joe never bought anything for us to dissect. We dissected squirrels. Now, I don't know if he could have supplied us with cats. He told us that when he caught a cat, he put a note on its collar telling its owner that he had caught it in his bird netting area. And if he caught it again, they wouldn't necessarily ever see it. Howard Platt, geology and anthropology. He taught me the value of journals. Now, in 7th grade, it wasn't scientific journals, it was National Geographic. And he taught us how to find things, how to put the stuff together. The joy of the hunt. Can you find that right article? And this was long enough ago that people didn't buy National Geographic on CD. You just had this mass of it in a bookcase somewhere. That if a tornado ever hit, that part of the house wouldn't move as a weight. John Bowles. We had 3 years of biology. The second year was all experimental. Boy, did that ruin me for college. When all you've done is experiments for a year and you get there and they're having you draw and label and never get out of your seat, it's a letdown. But John had a sneaky streak. He watched my little lab group measure a bunch of plants, spray a bunch of plants, do everything perfectly for 4 weeks. We got our data, and the ones we sprayed with growth hormone were tall. He said, all right, prove it. What test are you going to use? We said chi-square. Right test. One problem. He watched us have one plant in each treatment group. For 4 weeks, he'd known we didn't have anything significant. And he didn't tell us. Because had he told us, I wouldn't be remembering all these many years later. He taught us that one of the key things that you need to learn is that you learn from mistakes. And the job as a teacher is to let people make mistakes that aren't lethal. Bacon was chemistry, physics. You need to remember that I'm old enough that the social climate when I was in high school, civil rights marches were taking place throughout the South. We had a freedom rider who came north to get out of the trouble and join us. Bloody Sunday, assassination of JFK. In 1964, in August, there were race riots in Philly. One of my good friends, by that time, even though he was still in high school, was taking photographs for Associated Press. And he covered those riots. Kent was one of the few correspondents shot down over Cambodia during the Vietnam conflict. So I went off to college, having come from a very liberal background. Because if you start with believing that there's that of God in every man, that makes it real hard to not want everybody to be equal. I got involved in the Boy Scouts during high school. Well, I got involved in the Boy Scouts in 3rd grade. Stayed involved all the way through college. Took a break for a while until I had kids of my own. Got back. Standing up for what you believe can be really important. It's real hard for a little kid to admit he's a Boy Scout in school at times. That's my senior portrait for the yearbook. The expression on some of the kids in the elementary school, because GFS was K-12. When I showed up in uniform for that full week in February, and the thing that was really fun, I was down in the senior room, and a couple of the guys started giving me grief about still being in Boy Scouts. Bless her. A gal by the name of Linda Smith, the cheerleader that everybody wanted to be friends with. Linda looked at him and said, "What's wrong with that? I'm a den mother." I didn't get another bit of grief. Not one. This round patch basically says by that time it was time to give back. That's Junior Assistant Scoutmaster. That's what you are till you turn 18. And we started giving back. Well, GFS sent us off. We had commencement. We were to leave GFS and begin something new. And the school slogan is, "Behold, I have set before thee an open door." And of course, I pictured it as being a path into the woods. It was a path into life. And what did we find when we got out? I went to Bucknell, which is about as conservative, or at least in '66 was about as conservative as it could be. There was pressure to go to Earlham, to a friend's college, to follow my father and go to Haverford. But I liked the program at Bucknell. And I got there, and Dr. Cooper, an economics prof, was one of the leading members of the meeting. And he thanked me for being there. And he said, "It's important to come here. You could have gone to Earlham, and everybody would have agreed with you. It's important to go where people have different thoughts and maybe haven't been exposed to yours." Lordy, was he right. A whole group of 40, 2 of us didn't think we should be in Vietnam. And we debated that probably every night. But the other thing that Cooper said, which was equally important, was that we had to embrace ROTC. Because if we didn't, if we managed to kick the ROTC off of all the college campuses, then the only place that officers would come from would be the military. And they wouldn't have had as wide a view. They wouldn't have been exposed to as many things. Earth Day was my senior year. We looked at pollution. We looked at population growth. With that many years hindsight, we can actually see improvement. I used to drive down the expressway in Philadelphia in an orange haze. It was not anything due to anything I had eaten or drunk. It was due to the smog. Earth Day was getting really wound up. And then we went into Cambodia. Four kids got killed at Kent State. And the one thing we felt we needed to do was go back to our high schools. Go out into the community and say, look at what is going on. And Bucknell was one of the 430 colleges that closed down for a week. We went on strike. The faculty supported us. And we worked on information. Well, there are things that you learn when you work with people. The most critical is that people march to the tune of different drummers. Just because I hear sort of a pacifist style drummer doesn't mean that that's the only beat that's out there. And the critical thing is somebody following what they believe? Are they putting their faith into practice? Not are they putting my faith into practice. Are they putting theirs? My junior year, two friends both reached the pinnacle of their goals. Rich Dunn was awarded, I forget what commendation, for being the ROTC Student of the Year. John Mahoney burned to Stratford. They both were following the drummers that they heard. They both were in perfect step. Learning to value people for how they march. Not if they march to your tune, was one of the most critical lessons of that whole time. To take great pride in somebody's success. But what do you do after college? Picture my grandfather Tusaw. Grandfather Tusaw, I don't know if Janet can read it, Advanced Principles of Accounting. Set up the accounting lab for Wharton Business School. That's a tradition that I carry with me. There's grandfather Tusaw and Dad when Dad got his degree. If you notice that mortarboard, you'll see it any time you see me in academic regalia. Wearing grandfather Tusaw's mortarboard is just carrying down that tradition. The scariest thing right now for me is after I retire, whether or not Mitch will want to pick it up. He gave 3 lectures last week in a conservation biology course, so I think I've got a prayer. Well, believe it or not, when I started teaching, I didn't have white hair. I also weighed 150 pounds. That was a fun place to teach. A parochial school in Brighton, Massachusetts. Damn if they didn't dedicate the year. Well, you can't teach in a nature center. You can't teach outdoors. Brighton was a fun place to teach, and I used to bicycle a lot, but there weren't any woods I could take my students to. We went out from the schoolyard once to work on a hillside behind the school, and you know what we found? And somebody had stolen and burned a car on it the night before. You can't measure vegetation that's undergone a burned-out automobile. All right, combined with it would have made the kids look like they got in a fight in a charcoal pit. Well, I came here. This was a ADP group out at Confederate Breastworks. Started some water sampling, which Dr. Pence has taken over. The Christians Creek project started during a shower for my then baby daughter. Some of the people that Laurie worked with were in Headwaters Soil Conservation District. So we started water sampling. Yeah, and I've got a whole collection of things to lean against. Well, study nature, not books. That was something that Wayne Manning, my botany prof, told me. Studying nature is one of those things that you get to do around here. Some of you are going to study plant-type nature, critter-type nature. All of you are going to study human nature. See what you learn from it. How do you share what you know? How do you find out what somebody before you will share? To me, the camera is the way. I'll go out. I don't know if this is my alter ego or not. He's popped up in a couple slides. You couldn't see him, but he was right on the door sill on the open door. I'll go out and I'll take a picture of something. And then I'll go home and I'll confirm that I know who it is. Do a little bit of reading. Then how do you share it? Nowadays, with you characters, you put it on the web. When I retire, one of the dreams is that I'll put it on something smaller. It's currently in Dreamweaver 5. In CS5. And I could make an app out of it if I could ever find the time to do it, but someday. Yeah, I know I said study nature, not books. That's the top 3 out of 4 shelves in one of the 2 walls full of books in my study. Some of you have been in the office. There are a good 24 more feet of books, specifically field guide type books, down in the living room. So once you know who somebody is, what do you do with it? If you ever want to see what makes this character tick, just look up wildflowers of Augusta County. Just Google that. And you'll find at present there are only about 300 flowers in it. I've got 80 more that I need to finish working up all the documentation on. That was something that got started for field. How do you share something for which I don't think there's a text? I don't think anybody is going to be happy with me if I put that on the shelf at the bookstore and say it's required. Although there's some darn good books there. When you study nature, every now and then you have some surprises. This little guy we named Jamal. He wandered around camp for about a year and a half, 2 years. When he first showed up, boy, did that panic everybody. Because when you got a cute little bear cub wandering through a campsite at Boy Scout camp, you wonder where Mama is. Where is Mama? We never met Mama. When we first met Jamal, the rifle range sort of declared it a free shoot so they'd make lots of noise. They weren't shooting at the bear. They were just firing off round after round, hoping that he'd get the hint. He didn't. Well, you need to learn to embrace things like that, to make friends with it. You need to know to give it its distance. One of my profs in college asked one simple question of us all. And that was very simple. What would you want as an epitaph on your tombstone? And I think that sums me up pretty well. With the exception of the blasted papers and school chair, I don't think I've ever worked a day in my life. Whatever you do, whenever you wind up staking your time in, if you remember to put your faith into practice, to do something that's consistent with what you believe, if you can embrace the idea of service to others, you've got a real chance of enjoying what you do to the extent that it's not work. You're doing something that you wanted. And if I'm going to leave you with any tidbit, that's it. When you get to be as aged and decrepit and overweight as I am,